They say the Michigan Dogman is just a campfire story, a tale folks swap to pass the time on long hauls or around bars up north. Out here on the border between Michigan and Wisconsin, you always hear things, stories, about things in the woods, things bigger than bears, things that hunt like a beast and walk like a man. I always chalked it up to whiskey talk and nerves from too many miles on the road, until I stood face to face with something that came damn close to what the rumors described, monsters that shouldn't exist. My name's Joe Mercer. I'm 36, twice divorced, and thanks to some nasty accusations my second ex made up, pretty much unemployable. That's how I ended up in this godforsaken place. Been running night shifts at Halder's Fuel and Diner for going on 2 years now. Halder's isn't much to look at. Just a small, rundown truck stop planted on the edge of a lesser-used highway, real close to where Michigan turns into Wisconsin. Deep forest on all sides, miles of pines and hardwoods stretching out like a wall. That kind of country swallows things whole if you aren't careful. Halder's sits right in the middle of it. Last light for a long stretch of dark road. But that's okay. I've never fared well in the city. Quiet suits me. Figured I'd live out my years filling coffee for truckers, keeping the pumps running, maybe listening to a ball game when things were slow. But then things changed. Nights out here were always slow. I would clock in at Halder's around 11, check the pumps, wipe down the coffee machine. 1 or 2 drivers would come through. Otherwise, it was just me, lukewarm coffee, and the TV. Quiet. That's what I liked. Except quiet doesn't always mean safe. It didn't start slow like in most of the stories you find on the internet. No warning. One quiet night, I was sitting behind the counter, feet up, half watching an old baseball game when it happened. A bang. Loud. Sharp enough to rattle the window glass. It came from behind the building, where the dumpsters sat. At first, I thought maybe a bear got into the trash, or some drunk trucker hit one of the dumpsters. But then I heard it again. Metal scraping. Something heavy slamming into a wall like it meant it. I sighed, pressed pause, and grabbed my flashlight. It wasn't raining yet, but the air felt thick like it wanted to. I stepped out back, careful, walking slow toward the dumpsters. The security light back there wasn't working, so everything past the corner of the building was pitch black. That's when I heard it again. Another crash. Something metal getting shoved hard. My gut tightened. I swung my flashlight beam around, cutting through the dark. As I turned the corner, the smell hit me first, thick and rotten, like a mix of blood, garbage, and something worse. Then I saw it. One of the big dumpsters had been mangled and turned over like a toy. The steel wall was bent and shredded in places. Trash was scattered everywhere. But it wasn't just trash. There were streaks of dark red on the concrete. Blood. Thick smears leading away from the dumpster, like something had been dragged, fresh enough to glisten under the flashlight beam. Whatever did this wasn't just strong. It had torn into something, or someone. Then the beam caught movement, something big. A huge, dark shape slipping just out of the light, moving on all fours. My throat went dry, but I didn't turn back right away. I followed the trail of blood, flashlight beam steady as I pushed forward, each step feeling heavier. The smears glistened all the way across the cracked concrete and into the dirt beyond, leading toward the tree line, about 100 yards out. When I got close enough, just at the edge where the yard ended, I stopped, shined my light through the underbrush. That's when I saw something massive, hunched low, moving on all fours between the trees, slow, deliberate. I couldn't see any details. I just assumed it was a bear, even though that didn't explain the amount of damage I had seen. But what else could it be? It didn't look back at me. It just kept moving deeper into the woods, like it didn't care if I was there or not. I backed up slow, flashlight still raised, pulse hammering. Whatever it wasn't scared of me. And it had just learned that the dumpsters were a viable food source. A couple nights after the dumpster incident, the fog rolled in heavy. Thicker than usual, so dense I could barely see past pump 3 from the front window. Around midnight, I started hearing something off. Low thuds and crashes coming from behind the diner, out past the dumpsters. At first, I figured it was another dumpster raid, Maybe that thing I'd seen before, back sniffing around for more scraps. I grabbed my flashlight and headed out once again to see what was going on. This time, I grabbed a crowbar, just in case it turned out to be a bear after all. At least it made me feel a tiny bit safer. The night air was cold and damp. Every breath tasted like metal. I moved slow around the side of the building, light cutting through the mist. When I approached, I could see that none of the dumpsters had been turned over. 2 of them looked a bit banged up, but there was no mess on the ground. That's when I heard the noises again. They came from the tree line. It sounded like howling, although in a really weird kind of way. Not like a wolf or a dog. A lot deeper and much more terrifying. Every few seconds there was a howl. It sounded close, maybe 100 yards out, but I couldn't see anything through the fog. Then the howls shifted. They cut off sharp and turned into growls, loud, low, and threatening, like something had stopped calling and started warning. The kind of sound that sinks right into your bones and tells you not to take another step closer. I was absolutely terrified at this point, but also curious. I really wanted to see what was going on here. For a second, I even contemplated heading out into the fog to get a closer look. But before I could act on that ridiculously stupid thought, everything escalated. The growls sharpened, rising in pitch. Not a warning anymore. An argument. Some kind of standoff. I couldn't see a thing. Just that same thick fog rolling like smoke across the lot. But I could hear it. Snarls snapping back and forth. Heavy footfalls pounding the earth. Brush cracking. Trees creaking. Then it broke loose all at once. A deafening collision. The sound of bodies slamming together, tearing into each other just out of sight. It was horrible. Like 2 cats fighting, but 100 times louder and more terrifying. Somewhere just beyond the edge of the lot, 2 large animals were tearing into each other. Snapping jaws, claws scraping. Wet, meaty impacts that made my stomach twist. I stood there frozen, flashlight clenched in my hand, knowing whatever was out there was far bigger and meaner than anything I would like to meet in person. 2 predators locked in a fight I was lucky not to be caught in the middle of. Then the screams and yelps started. Desperate, ragged sounds that cut through the fog like a knife. Not just howls anymore. Wild, desperate screams. Pain and rage layered together. I couldn't see a thing, but I could hear everything. Massive figures crashing through the underbrush in a frenzy. Muscle tearing, bones snapping, claws ripping flesh. And it just kept going. A brutal, deafening nightmare that didn't stop for minutes. Like 2 wild animals, too stubborn to die. I didn't stick around to see how it ended. I backed up slow, heart hammering, flashlight shaking in my grip. Got back inside and locked up tight, nervously staring out the windows for the rest of the night. The night of the fog brawl, I couldn't sit still. The sounds kept playing over in my head, as did the images of the destroyed dumpster a few nights earlier. Something huge was out there in the woods, and it had started coming closer to the truck stop. I had to know what was going on. My sanity depended on it, and maybe my life did too. Next morning I called up Jack Halder himself. Old man hardly ever showed his face around here, but still handled all the books and security from home. Told him there was something or someone sneaking around the diner at night, and that I needed access to the last few days' footage. Didn't take much convincing. Halder gave me the login and briefly talked me through the system on the phone. Soon as I clocked in that night, I parked myself behind the monitors. Some cameras didn't work, half busted or dead zones, and big surprise, the one covering the dumpsters was one of them. Figures, but a few were still rolling. Lot cameras front and back and those watching the 2 pumps. I spent hours skipping through footage, nothing but raccoons and truckers relieving themselves literally everywhere. Then, around 2 nights back, I caught something. Grainy, barely more than shapes, but clear enough. Some large animal, something massive, looked weird as hell. Walking on all 4s at first, coming from across the highway and sneaking through the yard towards the pumps and the diner. Then my blood froze. As it approached the building, it lifted itself up from the ground and stood. Upright, like a man, but hunched over. What I saw was an absolute nightmare. And that face, my God, like a mutated dog that had been torn apart and put back together in a hurry. All those stories of dogmen and werewolves came back to mind in that moment, and I had been here when this footage was recorded, less than 50 feet away from that thing. Worse yet, I had chased after it the night of the dumpster incident unarmed, unconcerned like a completely idiot. I couldn't believe how lucky I was to still be alive. After hyperventilating for a few minutes, I got myself under control and continued going through the footage. On the screen, the thing seemed to be staring at the diner for a few seconds, then turned right and vanished behind a corner, probably heading out back to the dumpsters. Later that night, I found another clip, grainy and flickering like the first. This time, it wasn't the upright thing. It was something else. Similar head, same dark matted fur, but lower to the ground, walking weirdly on all fours, almost like some kind of mutated wolf, but much larger. About 5 feet tall on all fours. Its front legs, or arms, were longer than its hind legs, more like those of a gorilla than a canine. Its spine looked twisted, hunched so deep it was barely to lift its head. Where the first one had looked like a nightmare dogman standing up, this one moved more like an animal, a bit bulkier too. I watched it slip through the camera's frame, slow, heavy and deliberate, circling the pumps, sniffing around, then disappearing into the trees again. Both of them had been showing up on separate nights, pacing the same ground like it belonged to them. I had trouble coming to terms with what I saw on those tapes. I sat there, watching those clips over and over, heart thrumming in my chest. Whatever those things were, they were real, and they'd been circling the place for days already. Maybe that was the same thing I heard a few nights earlier, out in the woods. The timing fit, and now it made sense. The sounds of a fight, the howls. They'd been circling this place even back then, testing each other as much as testing us. Maybe they had been. Back then, I already had a really bad feeling about this whole thing. By that point, I was jumpy every night. Couldn't help it. After what I'd seen on those tapes, after hearing those screams out in the fog, I knew I wasn't imagining things. But knowing something's real doesn't mean you're ready for it to show up right behind you. It happened 2 nights after I pulled that last batch of footage, just past midnight. Business dead, like usual. I was restocking shelves, cigarettes mostly, trying to keep busy so I wouldn't sit there staring at the monitors all night. That's when I heard it. Scraping. Not outside. Inside. Coming from somewhere in the back of the building. I stopped, heart already thudding. For a second, I thought it was the wind, maybe a loose panel, but there was no wind. The night was dead still. I set the box of smokes down slow, grabbed my flashlight, and moved toward the back hallway. My boots echoed on the linoleum. The scraping got louder, metal on metal. Then it stopped. When I rounded the corner, I saw it. The back door wasn't shut all the way. It was cracked open an inch, and through that gap, something slid inside. An arm. Huge, thick as a fence post, covered in oily black fur, long claws scraping slow and deliberate against the frame. It was feeling its way inside. I could hear it breathing, low and steady, like it already knew I was there, and it was deciding whether or not to come in. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. That clawed hand traced the edge of the door for what felt like forever. Then, just as slow, it pulled back. The gap stayed open, but the thing was gone. Back into the dark. I stepped forward and slammed the bolt shut with shaking hands, pressed my back to the door, and just stood there, trying to get my breathing under control. I stepped forward and slammed the bolt shut with shaking hands, pressed my back to the door, and just stood there, trying to get my breathing under control. That's when it hit me fully. These things weren't out in the woods anymore. They weren't just circling. They were checking the place, testing it, and I'd just had a close call, really damn close. If I needed any more confirmation, that was it. The hand that I had seen wasn't the paw of canine. It was the hand of a primate, or something close. But the heads of these things definitely looked canine in the CCTV footage. These weren't just animals. They were werewolves, dogmen, whatever name you prefer. And there 2 of them. After the night with the arm in the doorway, I couldn't do things like I used to. First thing every shift, I'd check every lock twice. Back door, front door, storage room, even the damn bathroom. Then I'd pour a coffee and park myself in front of the security monitors. Couldn't help it. That screen became my whole world. Most nights it was shadows, fog, headlights, raccoons. But there were much more concerning things out there. Two distinct shapes. I'd seen them in the recordings, but now I caught them in real time. Not every night. Sometimes just one. Sometimes both. And when both showed up, that's when it got tense. One of them, always the same crooked posture, walked mostly upright, but hunched over like its spine couldn't take the weight. I realized it matched the prints I'd seen that night by Pump 3, the bigger set. The other one stayed low, walking on knuckles almost like a gorilla. Its back bent so bad its head never rose more than a couple feet off the pavement. That explained the smaller set of prints going the opposite direction. Back then, I didn't know what I was looking at. Now, seeing them on camera confirmed it. Both circling the lot, rubbing up against walls, pumps, and dumpsters, pissing everywhere. They were marking the truck stop as their territory. But the worst was when they saw each other. I couldn't hear it from inside, but you could see it. Sudden stops, both shapes freezing mid-movement, one coming from the pumps, the other from the trees. Then the standoffs began. It wasn't just standing still, it was a whole ritual. One would lower its head, hunching its shoulders, claws flexing against the concrete. The other would raise its back, standing taller, ears pinned back, its whole body shuddering like it was ready to explode. Their movements were slow and deliberate, circling each other in wide, slow arcs that tightened with each pass. You could see them sizing each other up, like neither wanted to make the first move unless it had to. And the longer I watched, the more I noticed details. On the cameras, I could see their jaws flexing, baring long, jagged teeth. Their bodies shuddered with low growls I couldn't hear from inside but could almost feel through the glass. Every so often, when they passed too close, one would take a swipe, huge clawed hands lashing out in a flash. A glancing blow, never full on. Like they were testing each other, keeping score. Sometimes their standoffs lasted a minute, sometimes 15. Tension so thick it felt like it pressed against the diner walls. Then, eventually, one would break off, slipping back into the trees like nothing had happened. But even when it ended, it didn't feel like a win. It felt like a train wreck waiting to happen. And me? I was just stuck in the middle, locked inside with nothing but those cameras and a crowbar that wouldn't do a damn bit of good if either of them decided to test the glass. I found myself watching more closely than I probably should have. That's when I saw it. Both of them were females. It wasn't obvious at first, not through the grainy footage, but once I knew what to look for, it clicked. Both had pronounced heavy shapes across their upper torsos, visible even through patchy fur and scars. Their chests carried weight that shifted with each movement, unmistakable in silhouette. When they turned sideways or reared up during their standoffs, I could make out swaying shapes, thick-skinned, scarred breasts, the kind no animal other than a human or primate would show. It explained why their movements seemed heavier, more deliberate than anything I'd expect from a bear or wolf. Even their posture gave it away, a kind of slow, deliberate movement that wasn't just about strength. It had weight and balance shaped by those features. Once I noticed, I couldn't unsee it. Even during that last fight, when one of them slammed against the diner window, the sheer mass across her chest made it impossible to mistake. I was watching two massive, battle-scarred female werewolves locked in some kind of endless contest over this stretch of pavement and diesel fumes. It was grotesque, entirely absurd. It was one of those stormy nights where the sky turns the same color as diesel smoke, wind screaming in off the lake, rain pelting down so hard it felt like nails. I'd just clocked in and done my usual rounds, checked the locks twice when I heard it, a heavy thud against the front door. Then another, louder. I turned toward the windows, heart already pounding, and there she was, one of them, the upright one, gray-skinned, hunched, her broad shoulders slick with rain, yellow eyes locked on me through the glass. And she wasn't just looking. She was throwing herself against the door. The whole building shuddered with each hit. I stood there frozen, clutching the crowbar I kept behind the counter, knowing it wouldn't matter. A few more hits, and that door was coming down. My mind raced. Run for the back door? Then what? My truck was out the front. I'd never make it past that thing. Hide in the freezer? I would be cornered in there. None of it would matter. Then, out of nowhere, the other one appeared, the one that walked on 4 legs. She somehow snuck up on her rival from behind, using the assault on the door to her advantage. Her jaws clamped onto the upright one's shoulder, huge teeth sinking deep, penetrating skin and bone. The upright one let out a scream, raw, animal, and horrible, as her rival crushed her shoulder and yanked her backwards. It wasn't just dragging, it was pulling her down hard toward the pavement, jaws locked in tight, refusing to let go. The upright female's feet scraped and scrambled against the concrete, claws desperately searching for traction, but it didn't do her any good. Her body buckled as the crawler dragged her all the way down onto her side, slamming her full weight into the ground with a sickening crunch. The crawler's hunched form pressed low, using sheer weight to pin her opponent down, while the upright one let out another horrible scream, twisting her body just enough to turn around. In that moment, her jaws opened wide and clamped onto the crawler's arm, her own claws raking through the crawler's flanks in thick, tearing motions. The fight was brutal. Fur, skin, and chunks of muscle flew loose with every swipe. Their limbs tangled together, both using sheer strength to try and pin the other down. But it wasn't just wild flailing. The more they fought, the closer they got, until both werewolves had all their teeth and claws buried in each other's flesh. One's massive hand gripping the other's shoulder, the other's claws hooked deep into her rival's ribs. It was like some twisted, brutal embrace, their bodies pressed chest to chest, jaws slowly crushing bones. For a moment, neither seemed to have the upper hand. Locked together, trembling with rage and pain, claws sunk in so deep their arms visibly shook from the tension. It wasn't clear if either could break free without leaving part of themselves behind. Just raw, unimaginably painful stalemate right there in the rain-soaked lot, less than 10 feet from the diner windows. The upright one managed to get her back legs under her, kicking out violently. I watched as she shoved the crawler against the pavement, both creatures rolling over and over like a pair of wrestlers. Blood sprayed across the windows and onto the lot, thick and dark in the overhead lights. Paws scraped for purchase on the slick concrete, claws shrieking as they dragged across metal and pavement both. Neither one let go, not for a second. It wasn't just violence. It was a contest of sheer survival. 2 apex predators locked in a death struggle I couldn't look away from no matter how hard I tried. With a sudden jerk, both creatures wrenched free from each other's grip, flesh tearing audibly. Before I could blink, they lunged again, jaws wide open. For a few seconds, their jaws kept snapping at each other, both trying to bite down on the other's throat or neck, both missing by inches as their movements blurred together. Then, all at once, they found purchase. Their jaws locked together, one clamped down on the other's lower jaw, the other biting onto her rival's upper jaw. It wasn't a clean bite. It was a brutal clinch, both sets of teeth digging into each other's faces, pulling and twisting. Their muzzles strained against one another, lips curled back, blood already running down their chins. For a moment, it looked like neither would let go, each trying to tear the other's head sideways or rip it off entirely. Both upright now, full weight thrown against each other. Their twisted bodies staggered sideways, their claws dug in, gripping each other like grappling hooks, holding tight as neither one was willing to let go. With their jaws locked and their claws buried deep into each other's flesh, they had nothing left to tear with. Instead, they started to grapple again, pushing, shoving, twisting, each trying to overpower the other through sheer strength. Their hulking shapes pressed together like 2 living battering rams, legs braced wide, arms flexing so hard I could see their muscles bulging even through the rain and blood. The struggle built up to a sudden violent surge, both of them losing their balance at the same time. Both creatures crashed into the diner wall beneath the windows with all the momentum they had built up, a solid, bone-jarring impact that vibrated through the building. The wall groaned, metal siding buckled inward, and the entire structure shuddered like it had taken a direct hit from a wrecking ball. I stumbled back against the counter as the window panes flexed and bowed under the pressure, glass creaking like it might explode inward at any second. After the crash, both of them disappeared below the window ledge, out of my line of sight. All I could hear was thrashing, flesh hitting flesh, claws on pavement, wet impacts mixed with growls. I edged forward, heart in my throat, straining to see through the rain-streaked glass. Then it happened. A scream so sharp and loud it cut through everything. The storm, the building's groans. One of them was hurt bad. I couldn't tell which. A few seconds later, I saw movement again. A single shape rising into view beyond the windows, dragging the other by the neck, her massive jaws clamped tight around her rival's throat. Both were covered in terrible wounds. For a second, the victorious creature paused, her eyes pale and burning, locking onto mine through the rain-streaked glass. We stared at each other, just me and her. And even through the window, I felt it, like being pinned under a spotlight. But then, just as quickly, that moment passed. Without another sound, she turned and began dragging her dead rival back toward the tree line, vanishing into the underbrush. And all I could feel in that moment was relief. She'd found her meal for the night, and I didn't matter anymore, for now. I didn't even wait for Halder to show up the next morning. As soon as the sun cracked over the trees, I grabbed my duffel from under the counter, clocked out for the last time, and hit the payphone out front. Told Halder he needed to check the cameras. Told him there were things prowling around his diner that no man could handle. I didn't stick around to explain, just left the keys in the till. By sunrise, I was already halfway to Milwaukee. My truck rattled down the highway, everything I owned stuffed in 2 bags. I didn't care about the job or the quiet life anymore. I'd seen enough. Halder could keep his diner. I was done.